All right, I think we're getting set. And I do believe we are now live. Let's see. Okay. So we're now live, and I'd like to welcome all of you that are watching right now, and welcome to all of you that are catching the replay. My name is Rashad King, and I'm the facilitator of Infusing Activism into Writing, a story to screenplay writing workshop for writers who want to make their voices heard through their work and make something that lasts. This iteration is hosted by Butterfly Noir, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Their mission is to provide opportunities for marginalized voices. Butterfly Noir provides free and low-cost educational workshops, programs, and consulting services for artists that help them develop and publish their creative content. And to learn more, please visit butterflynoir.org. So I'm excited to welcome you into tonight's sneak peek, what's happening within our world, and invite you to join the next iteration. We've covered a lot of ground and explored many things I think you might find valuable. Tonight, I'm actually going to be reading a little bit uh, from our fireside chat as it relates to dialogue. Tonight's session is all about dialogue, saying more with less and meaning more with what's unsaid, and how opposition and oppression actually shapes what characters can say and what they hide in subtext. All right. So some of the tools that we sort of center on as it relates to writing is that sometimes when you write, it's easy to just sort of write dialogue. Like it's easy to just say directly what it is and what's happening. It's not as easy to layer it to where you have to sort of watch the scene and just kind of watch things unfold as they, come along. It's really not the writer's job to explain every feeling. It's actually to create the conditions where the feeling is experienced. One of the things that we have done over the course of the workshop is we've landed on a specific feeling that we want to be translated through every single aspect of our project. So it doesn't matter what project, it doesn't matter in what space we create that one particular feeling that must come through every single time. And so as a writer, it's your job to make sure that you express that fully. Some call it the tone, some call it just the energy, the essence of what's being said. But really it's just that emotion, that feeling, whether it's dread or regret or grief or happiness, whatever that is, you want to make sure as a writer you can pull that through. All right. So one thing that you should understand is that when it comes down to writing, you want to leave things out, and that comes down to omission. All right. So you want to leave out the obvious. So if two people both know the truth about something, um, you don't really have to state it because the truth is the truth. So sometimes you just kind of let the silence do what it needs to do. And I think there's a saying, what is it? What's understood doesn't need to be said, or something like that. And that kind of goes into omitting these particular things. All right. So reactions. Okay. So whether that's a gesture, whether that's a sip of coffee, whether that's, a hand that starts to clap and then doesn't clap, whatever it is, like the reactions will tell us things that certain characters won't. And so that helps amplify what that looks like from a writing perspective. Um, the next thing is how much economy are you giving your lines? All right. So every line must actually change the scene. Okay. If it repeats what we already know, you need to cut it because it's just taking up space. So every single thing that happens is to move the story forward. And whether that again is through a character reveal, whether that's through, moving the plot forward, twisting the plot, changing the story up, whatever it is, every single scene, every single line needs to move the story forward. All right. Punctuation and rhythm. All right. So there's a certain punctuation, there's a certain flow. One of my favorite projects that is just so captivating to me as a writer. When I first saw it, I mean, I was just hooked and I could not move. It was the opening scene of the TV show Scandal. All right. So if you haven't seen Scandal, this is political drama. Shonda Rhimes created years ago, following Olivia Pope, who is a quote unquote fixer for DC. She lives in DC area and does all these high profile, fixings as a gladiator in a suit and all these things. And the very first opening scene was so captivating. It was this girl that walked into a bar, that walked up to this guy, and she told him that she was not interested in going on a date. She was just here to cancel the date because the friend set it up and all this. She wasn't interested. And he's like, that's cute, thank you. But this is not a date. This is a job interview. And she's like, a job interview? I didn't apply for you. And he's like, yeah, you did. And she was like, no, I didn't. He was like, ask me who I work for. And she's like, what? He's like, ask me who I work for. And she's like, who do you work for? He's like, Olivia Pope. And she like gets her eyes just bulk up and she's like so intrigued. She's like the Olivia Pope. And he goes on and on and on into this spiral, this sort of ebb and flow as to why she wants to work with them and things about her that she didn't even realize. And it's so captivating. If you actually haven't seen Scandal, which many of you may have, but if not, I would encourage you just to kind of go on YouTube. I think that scene might be on YouTube, but just kind of see what that looks like, just how captivating that is, literally from the moment she walks in the door and the moment that she walks out, and then the titles come onto the screen. It's just so captivating. So yeah, so the way that you use punctuation, the way that you do your monologues, the way that you actually write, the rhythm of the words, that all makes sense. And it also makes it also reflects your voice as a writer. All right. And so another thing is objects and setting. Okay, so certain things like you have an old picture, for example, and it's got cracks in it or something. You've got a voicemail, that's a full voicemail box that can't accept voicemails anymore. Rusty keys, all these different things. Like objects, they actually hold secrets that the characters can't really say out loud. One thing in particular that I sort of was thinking about was an example. And one example, when it comes down to being very direct with the dialogue, is someone saying, for instance, they fired him because he was black, right? So that's very direct. They fired him because he was black. Okay, it's another thing for the character to walk into the room and runs her finger across the nameplate. It has his name on it, and she looks away and she goes, well, at least HR is consistent. That's very different. It's the same idea, right? But it's a very different impact. The subtext version actually forces the audience to feel what's going on. It feels, that injustice. It feels that thing, the cost of speaking it out loud. Now, the other thing, when it comes down to oppression, be it opposition, censorship, threat, or consequence, that actually changes everything. It teaches the characters what to say in public and what to keep hidden in private. So it basically asks the question, what happens if I tell the truth? Will I lose my job? Will I lose my family? Will I get disappeared? Will I lose my standing? Will I lose all respect? All right. So the possibility of those losses, what gives every half sentence is weight. All right. So just keep that in mind, as you're writing and you're discovering these things as you go along. So, how do you show up, on the page without lecturing people? Now, again, there are times where the lectures are important. There are times where you have to incorporate the lectures and, the finger wagging and all of that stuff. Like all of that has its purpose. It has its own, it has its own thing, and it serves its own purpose. But sometimes you do want to just sort of sometimes you don't want to lecture, and sometimes that's where you get more of the entertainment value, where you're not lecturing people. And so before you write anything, you just kind of want to map it out, what the cost looks like. So you ask yourself, what will happen if this is said? All right, then you let that shape the line, or you let the character avoid the line altogether. All right. Another one is code switching and small lies. All right. So a character might sound cheerful in public, but behind the scenes, they'll, flip and they'll use very different language with somebody that they trust. Those differences tell us, what they hide. So you can play with code switching and the little small lies, with your characters and their world. All right, so you make other characters the pressure valve, right? So neighbors, clerks, children, like all of that, their questions and their reactions to stuff can actually reveal certain rules without you actually explaining what's going on. So within those conversations, that kind of reflects what's happening with your protagonist or your antagonist, whatever character it is. All right. And so another thing is silence. That's a big one. All right. So slamming the door and then just complete silence, and then a cup that is dropped on the ground and unfortunately shattered. That's 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 a big one. Because it's silence. And what happens within that silence is often, where the teachable moments are, how people respond to those moments. So, with that said, there are just a lot of different things that you want to remember and keep in mind as you give voice to these characters, because ultimately, these characters are exactly who you are and what needs to happen. So I'm curious if there anyone, within the group here, that has a thought, maybe about how they've seen those particular things show up in the way that they write, or the way that you write. How have you seen maybe the silence show up in your words, or maybe the code switching, or maybe weighing the cost of, being silenced, or, not being able to say certain things. I'm curious if anyone has, ever experienced that, as you're sort of writing, or maybe, throughout the course of this session or the workshop in general. Anyone have a thought?
Yeah, I have a thought.
Yeah, Kasir, appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I haven't actually wrote it in yet, but now
Yeah.
that you're bringing it to my attention, I see why I could write it in that. And I'm
Okay.
also saying, is that like Foley? Like, is that like adding like the Foley? Like,
Well,
that's what you call recording, like the sound, right? Sound of things.
yeah. So Foley, yeah, that is definitely post-production, like whatever different things. One of my favorite things when I first found out about Foley, I was very young, but this movie had came out, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and it's an animation movie, and I saw actually how they were making the sounds, and like when the meatballs were hitting the ground, that was actually the sound of the Foley artist taking wet towels and just sort of slapping them on, the floor, which I thought was super cool. So that's a little bit different. I think you may be speaking on like special effects, audio things like that. But yeah,
Yeah,
Foley was
because
uh,
when you mentioned a cup dropping, like glass dropping, it was like, would you write that in your story like that? Like
yeah,
you mentioned like quiet moments, like
yeah. So for me, I would probably approach it where, depending on the scene, depending on the scenario, maybe someone is nervous about something, or maybe someone just found something out. So either they could be, pissed and they're like walking around, angry, walking around, upset, and they're like drinking, profusely, and they're like, kind of tossing things, throwing things around, and then like maybe they spin real fast, or like they, however they turn around, or whatever happens, and the glass just slips from their hand, and you would just actually just sort of write that as um you know character uh, twists and turns and spins into a maddening rage, and as they take one final sip and slams the cup down or something, it slips and it falls to the ground, s- splintering or shattering into a million little pieces, and then put something like silence, or a long beat or something like that. So yeah, so you can frame it that way. Again, depending on sort of where they where they what the scene is and what that calls for. Because again, if they're nervous about something, someone just again tried to silence them, their hand could be shaking just out of fear, and they could just drop and it could just, shatter. So yeah. Okay, yeah. Charlie, yeah, I see your hand up here.
Yeah, like for me, I would like to use it like, when someone is silenced and they are mad and like it create tension and tension
Mhm.
and tension. So I feel I would like to use that like to create tension. When you're a kid and like your mom is like not talking, but it's something. So my story is really about like it's like drama, comedy, but it have like a twist of horror.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm thinking about like what you said about the cup, like when it has silence, like will something happen every time that the silence is coming? Like everyone, like something, tension is there. So that's how I feel I would like to.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, sometimes you will. Sometimes that silence will speak volumes. Sometimes you'll have something immediately, like when the cup falls and it shatters on the ground, you'll have someone immediately start panicking about it. This may have been their favorite cup or their favorite, thing. This may have been, it may have belonged to someone else. Maybe perhaps someone passed away and this actually belonged to the person that passed away. And so now they're not only missing the person that's passed away, but they also are missing that, heirloom or that particular item that belonged to that person. Now it's like creating further disconnect and all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can approach that, particularly through again something as simple as this mug or this cup. So yeah, there are many ways to explore that. And if you're doing horror and just, I mean, there's a lot of ways. I mean, the cup could just slide off the counter by itself and just crash into a million pieces. Like there's so many different things that you could do with that. So
I have
yeah,
a question.
okay. All right, cool.
Okay, so because we learned about subtext and saying more by saying less, my question is if you have certain hidden truths that you don't want to just outright say within the dialogue, at what point do you reveal the truth to the audience? Because what if the audience doesn't get it if you don't outright just say what the secrets are, what the hidden truths are? If you don't outright say it and you hint around it or you show with actions and feelings and things, how do you make sure that the audience gets it and understands?
Well, there's a very careful way that you have to do that. And first of all, it starts with audience interpretation. Okay, so a lot of times these things are open to interpretation. So whether or not you're, matter of fact about it, if you layer it in, there are some people that are going to pick up on it. There are certain movies, for instance, Sorry to Bother You. It's so stacked and so layered with so many different hidden gems and hidden truths that people don't even understand. For instance, that whole thing with the horses. Um, people have no idea what that meant or what that represented. So you would do things like that. As a writer, you're just telling your story. And again, you're not actually writing a dictionary, you're not writing a thesaurus, you're writing this creative piece that is engaging and entertaining. And so you can incorporate those things, but you do it in a way that makes sense to you. So you kind of, leave Easter eggs and just kind of, let the audience interpret it. It's just like artwork, you know what I'm saying? Like you know what it meant to you. And sometimes it doesn't mean much of anything. But if there's something that's really important to you, you just have to kind of figure out the best way for you to incorporate that. Again, whether that's through an image, whether that's through an object, whether that's through a conversation between two other people that's not directly the protagonist, whether it's something that's overheard by someone. Like there are ways to do it. It's just you just kind of have to you just kind of have to make a creative decision on how you want to say it. Because like I said, you can be very direct about it, you can be very clear about it, and then you just sort of layer it in, however you see fit. And again, that can be done through a lot of different things. So that could, again, through clothing, images, symbols, like so many different things. So yeah, so there's different ways of doing it. But yeah. So we're going to head back in to the session, but I wanted to, again, bring this live to you all so that you were able to get a part of what we deal with and what we go through and what we experience and explore within this particular container. Of course, we hate that we hate that we missed you for this particular iteration of infusing activism into writing. And we do hope that you will join us for the next iteration. And of course, don't worry, because we'll be back next Thursday night with another live stream. And for more information and to stay connected, please visit butterflynoir.org. And please, if you're on Facebook, be sure to like the Butterfly Noir Facebook page. You can go to facebook.com/butterflynoirinc. So that's Butterfly Noir Inc. So that's facebook.com/Butterfly Noir INC. All right. We appreciate you for tuning in tonight, and